think we remember singing that as children. Good morning and welcome to Granite Peak Unitarian Universalist Congregation. I'm Kelsey Wilkes and I am your worship associate today. We extend a warm welcome to all and glad you are here and hope you are in good health. This is the mission statement of our congregation. We are a compassionate spiritual community that celebrates diversity, nurtures the personal and spiritual growth of all ages, shares our gifts, promotes justice for all, and serves the world we live in. Please join us after the service for coffee and socializing in small groups in Davis Hall, and it's all decked out for the 4th of July. If you're viewing the services online, you'll be able to join a breakout group at the end of the service. If you're here for the first time, please check out our website, prescottuu.org, for more information about us. And if you're here in person, there will be time to introduce yourself at the end of the service, and then please stay and chat with a member or two. There will be refreshments in Davis Hall and coffee. We thank our pianist, Lena Hubin, and all of our Sunday morning volunteers, including Martin and Brad, whose name isn't Brad, but I will call him Brad forever and ever, because I called him Brad and now he's Brad. That's how it works up here. In addition to the announcements that we're showing on the screen before the service, you can read about other happenings at GPUUC in the weekly peak, in our View newsletter, on our website, and there were printed copies of the announcements in the foyer, which you can pick up when you go to Davis Hall. I particularly want to draw your attention to a movie screening, Bad Faith, and Bad Faith, and a book signing of Democracy in Chains, written by Nancy McLean. The event will be held at Granite Peak this Tuesday at 3:30. If you signed up online and got a message today that it had been changed to 9:45, please ignore that. It is not true. We don't want you here all day. It's 3:30 to 6 p.m. There are flyers in the foyer. Nancy McLean is a historian and author. She will sign and discuss her book, Democracy in Chains, along with a screening of a documentary, Bad Faith, analyzing the factors that gave rise to the current form of Christian nationalism in the U.S. If you do plan to attend, if you just let me know so I can add a few ticks to this so Marianne and I can make sure we bring enough food for the attendees. Sandra Palacios, our Faith Development Coordinator, is teaching ages 5 and up across the street in the Faith Development Building, and we do have a nursery here in this building. I want to give a brief introduction to our speaker. Reverend Becky Gunn is a woman most of you already know, as she has spoken here often. She arrived in Prescott 9 years ago after she retired from her ministry in Bangor, Maine. She loves Prescott's natural beauty and has found her people here, like most of us have. She's been active in OLLI, AAUW, and DWPA. She's grateful to be asked to occasionally speak to you and considers it an honor, and I am always honored to be your worship associate. And now we begin our service in the Unitarian Universalist tradition of lighting the chalice. Our chalice lighter this morning is Dawn Karad. Thank you, Dawn. May the light we now kindle inspire us to use our powers to heal and not to harm, to help and not hinder, to bless and not curse, to serve others, and to support and defend our democracy. And let's just go back to the old-fashioned matches that, we've used since the beginning of the democracy. Thank you, Dawn. Appreciate it. And now Becky Gunn will offer you words of gathering.
It's only a few days until the 4th of July, a day that is almost considered sacred, for it is rumored that on that date we had an agreement among the various colonies that we were going to dissolve our relationship with Britain. As with most history, there is some truth to this, but then again, there are some areas that need clarification. Nevertheless, today we will be speaking about some history as to the reasons why it was thought necessary to become an independent set of states. It was about an ideal, about the thought of governing by principle, not power. These men who wrote, debated, and ultimately signed the Declaration of Independence courageously made a covenant to live for a higher purpose, the common good. Were they flawed men? Yes. Most of us agree that many of their practices in life were not choices we would make today. But they believed in rights associated with natural law. They saw a better way, an idealized way, a path. Let us consider today their purpose, their covenant with history, and their courage. I would ask that those of you who are able to stand and help us sing our opening hymn, which is number 121 in your gray hymnals, if you want to use that, or the words will be, I think, on the screen. We'll build a land.
We'll build a land where we bind up the broken. We'll build a land where the captives go free, where the oil of gladness dissolves all mourning. Oh, we'll build a promised land that can be. Come, build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like the ever-flowing stream. We'll build a land where we bring the good tidings to all the afflicted and all those who mourn, and we'll give them garlands instead of ashes. Oh, we'll build a land where peace is born. Come, build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like the ever-flowing stream. We'll be a land building up ancient cities, raising up devastations of old, restoring ruins of generations. Oh, we'll build a land of people so bold. Come, build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like the ever-flowing stream. Come, build a land where the mantle once faint and once weak, where like oaks of righteousness stand her people. Oh, we'll build the land, my people we seek. Come build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like the ever-flowing stream.
Please join me in saying the words to our covenant. They will appear on the screen. Here we go. Love is the doctrine of our congregation. The quest for truth its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve others in community, thus do we covenant together. In keeping with our covenant, Dixie King has passed out a paper from the Social Justice Committee. You may or may not have all gotten it, but it is a request for a family that has lost their job. They're losing their apartment on July 11th. They don't have air conditioning in their car. They don't have money for a variety of things, and they need help now. And I think, Dixie, they're trying to get to Texas where they have family. So what Dixie said is currently they're living in a basement with no kitchen. They're trying to get senior housing in Texas. If not Texas, they're going to Pennsylvania, but they have a car with no air conditioning, and kind of everything has crashed down on them at once. So if you can help them, please see Dixie after the service. And now, our beloved community is the heart of Granite Peak Unitarian Universalist Congregation. As we experience a moment of music and meditation, we will take a few minutes to silently acknowledge the joys and concerns of our hearts and minds. If there is an event that moves you to joy or concern, hope or gratitude, I invite you to come forward silently and drop a pebble in the dishes of water as an affirmation to our connection to one another. I will drop the first stone to acknowledge and rejoice that Patrick and Leslie Grady are celebrating their 54th wedding anniversary on July 3rd. Woo-hoo! May our joys and sorrows and concerns be surrounded by the healing communal water of this beloved community. So may it be that we acknowledge this as one. Please join us in singing these words of comfort. As we prepare to take the offering this morning, let us embrace the feeling of connection and community that we have when we gather here each week. Let us remember that this congregation and its programs are supported by your generosity. Allow me to also remind you that this is the last day of the church year. If you have not fulfilled your pledge, we would really appreciate it if you would do that today. So write a check, put pledge in the memo line, or if you're going to pay your pledge by cash, please see who's doing money today. Barb's doing money. Go to the office, hand her your cash, and say, please mark this down for my pledge so that we can finish this year out with all pledges being taken care of. And Marianne is wildly waving her hand.
In the memo line, if you could write year 23-24, then we will know it's for the current fiscal year.
So you can write fiscal year 23-24 if you're finishing up your pledge like me, or if you're already pledging in advance for next year, you can write 24-25. And that way we'll keep the money rolling in as we move forward with lots of challenges before us. But let us also announce that we also give back to the greater community through our Seeds of Support program. This month's recipient is Prism Network. Please read about them in your order of service. To give online, you can visit our website, or, and I wrote this down and it may not be right, so Art, you need to tell me if I was right or not. On the back of the program, the order of service, there's a QR code. Does that take you to us or to the Seeds of Support? I think it takes you to us. So savvy people can scan the QR code and do a donation that way as well. So please enjoy the offertory music, America the Beautiful by Catherine Lee Bates. We acknowledge the generosity of spirit expressed through this blessing. What is given in love is received with gratitude. Blessed be.
These are some words from the signers of the Declaration of Independence. Please consider these words seriously. They were spoken or written with deep moral conviction. Jefferson wrote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness."
John Adams, our second president, wrote, "Liberty cannot be preserved without a general knowledge among the people. Let us tenderly and kindly cherish, therefore, the means of knowledge. Let us dare to read, think, speak, and write."
John Adams also said, "What do we mean by the revolution? The war? That was no part of the revolution. It was only an effect and consequence of it. The revolution was in the minds of the people before a drop of blood was shed."
And Ben Franklin wrote, "It is the responsibility of every citizen to question authority." John Adams said, "I am a revolutionary so my son can be a farmer and so his son can be a poet." He also said, "Always stand on principle, even if you stand alone." And now please rise and body your spirit, and we are going to sing hymn number 6, "Just as Long as I Have Breath."
Just as long as I have breath, I must answer yes to life. Though with pain I made my way, still with hope I meet each day. If they ask what I did wrong, tell them I said yes to life. Just as long as vision lasts, I must answer yes to truth. In my dream and in my dark, always that elusive spark. If they ask what I did wrong, tell them I said yes to truth. Just as long as my heart beats, I must answer yes to love. Disappointment pierced me through, still I kept on loving you. If you ask what I did wrong, tell them I said yes to love.
When one listens to proclamations such as the Declaration of Independence, one is inspired. One begins to think that at this point of view, that it was universally accepted, that it was always meant to be, that when the first settlers landed on the North American continent, that a republic was inevitable. We have so made this document into scripture that we take the story and its creation literally. We seldom consider the process leading to the Declaration, and for that matter, the reasons why it was created beyond the generic concept of freedom. I want to discuss some historical facts today, some of them not so important, but sort of fun, and then I want to provide some perspectives arising from the document. First, how many of you think that the Declaration of Independence was signed on July 4th? Well, after the document was passed by the Continental Congress, only John Hancock signed approving that the text of the document was accurate, and it was witnessed by the Secretary, Charles Thomson. By July 19th, all of the colonial ruling bodies approved the document. Congress then ordered that it be engrossed. In today's terminology, that would be copied onto parchment paper. You might not know that the parchment paper onto which it was copied was just everyday parchment paper used for regular documents. Apparently, the creators of the Declaration thought that this was important, but not historical in terms of preserving the document for perpetuity. By August 2nd, the calligraphy copy was created and signed by most of the 56 founders. Let's see, lost my place. Believe it or not, some signed the document over the next several months. So given that most of us think that the document was signed and enacted on July 4th, and thus it is our birthday as a nation, perhaps we ought to consider changing it to August 2nd as the official date. Not that it matters really, but it goes to show that many of us accept the history we were taught in schools. I think that's a cautionary tale. For many of us, our education about the Revolutionary War, our Declaration of Independence, and the issues leading up to it have been simplified. It is seldom nuanced in its approach. While there were many issues leading up to the Declaration, it should be noted that the war against the British troops and the Parliament was begun several years prior to the actual publication of this broadside. The concept of independence from the Crown was not a predominant one in the early 1770s. Even when the First Continental Congress was called, the purpose was to find some way to resolve the problems with the Crown. The most common view was that it was Parliament that was awry in their views, not the Crown. It was a long-held belief that the king supported representation, that the laws to tax and declare war and to organize governmental services came from elected representation in the Parliament. In other words, there was a sense that those chosen by a vote of the people made the decisions in England, not the Crown. So the First Continental Congress beseeched the Crown, asking the king to acknowledge that it was against British legal precedent to tax without representation, for the colonies had absolutely no representation in the British Parliament. Most of Congress firmly believed that the king would see the reason of their argument. The crown did not. They responded with force. So the Congress authorized the army to respond in kind. This was not an easy decision, but even with that authorization of an army, many believed that there was still a likelihood of resolution. Not so. By the time the Second Continental Congress met, there was a cadre of individuals who acknowledged that they had two choices. Either they had to give in to the crown and accept its demands, or they could proclaim their right to govern themselves representatively. It was still not clear initially what form of government it would be. After all, the suggestion by Thomas Paine for a republic was seen as wildly, I could say, revolutionary. No other country in the world had such a government. This Congress, if it were to suggest a republic, would now be stepping onto new ground, but a ground that may have felt somewhat firm, but it would have been rocky and filled with quicksand. But in the end, they saw no other way than to declare their independence. It was risky. In fact, some might say it was delusional. As this document was signed, the mood was serious. They were laying their lives, their fortune, and their sacred honor on the line. Why? They were making a covenant with a higher purpose than themselves. Just this morning, after reading a column by David Brooks, which meant that I had to rewrite some of my sermon, I realized that making a covenant defines this nation. David Brooks mentions in this column that he tries to understand why liberals, those supporting the ideals of the Declaration, today are having problems successfully advocating for those ideals. In part, he says it is because we have become transactional or contractional versus covenantal. What is the difference? It boils down to the fact that there needs to be a commitment to a higher purpose. We liberals tend not to have that covenantal relationship with a higher purpose. It's not a contract. It's not a transaction. It needs to be an understanding that it is a deep-seated, ongoing commitment to our ideals. Now, these revolutionaries were young. 18 of the 56 were still in their 30s. 3 were even in their 20s. There was only one man, Benjamin Franklin, and of course they were all men. He was in his 70s. Almost all of the group, with the exception of Samuel Adams of Massachusetts, owned substantial property. They were prosperous. All but 2 had wives and children at home who would be subjected to the vicissitudes of war up and down the eastern seaboard. All of the signers of the Declaration became traitors immediately upon the signing of the document. On the day of the signing, the Continental Army stood at about 10,000 men under George Washington. There were also militias in each of the colonies or states, but they were poorly trained and inadequately armed. The British, on the other hand, had this flotilla just off Sandy Hook, consisting of 42,000 men. That's a 4-to-1 advantage for the British. Not great odds. At that time, At that place, as they were signing the document, they could be reasonably sure that they had more to lose materially than they had to gain. And herein lies their greatness. They truly believed in the principle of representation, of the freedom to elect those who govern them. It was a principle based on the concept of the worth of every male property holder. I understand that's not what we want today, but they had the idea that these men had a right based in natural law. I want to emphasize that they believed in a natural law based on the concept of the common good, that their higher, deep-seated belief, that was their purpose, the common good. The current belief in the value of the individual versus the good of the whole was not yet dominant. Each of these men believed that what they were doing would benefit their colony, their state, and while they obviously had to consider their individual situations, they opted for the larger community. The establishment of a government where all are worthy of representation, which would lead to a better governed society. The concept of the worth of all is firmly ingrained in Unitarian Universalism. We hear from some in our political miasma that we need to hearken back to the values of the founders. As with all scriptures, the genesis of these documents is not the divine, but rather the cultural and societal norms of the time. In 1776, men were the property holders, the thinkers and the doers and the movers and shakers. Women bore children, worked the farm or business, and when the men came back, well, the women were powerless yet again. Native Americans had absolutely no rights, in part because they were not considered to be fully human. And as for slavery, among other reasons, the free market provided that chattel was cheaper than paying wages, leading to higher profitability. I do not want to return to these cultural norms. And if those founders were present today, I, based on my philosophical and political biases and moral beliefs, believe that these founders would now include women in government, oppose slavery, and work to overturn the awful things that we have done to our indigenous peoples. As a Unitarian Universalist, my hope is that we can instead return to one of the primary principles of the founders: concern for the good of the whole. In our society today, we are so focused on me, on the individual. I would encourage us instead to think of what is beneficial for society as a whole. I know that I believe that healthcare is a right. I'm a believer that education is essential for the whole of us and for the continuation of democracy. I'm a believer that no one in the richest of nations should go hungry and without shelter. I believe in the rights of women to own property and make decisions about their lives, including their reproductive choices. These are some of the principles that I believe are inherent in the values of our founders, which is the common good. Not one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence was better off materially after the Revolutionary War. Many of the founders and signers lived in poverty after the war. all, remember, were prosperous before. They sacrificed for us. We, as a country, benefited from their sacrifice. I ask a rhetorical question here, and I want you to think about it honestly. Do you believe in something so totally, so much so that you would be willing to put your life and your family and your property at risk? Would you be willing to die for a principle? What are the odds that you would be willing to take? 4-1 against you, as the signers did? I believe I'm a principled person. Yet when looking in the mirror and asking that question, I'm not always sure that I would be willing to take such a stand. But I hope I would. Would you? Today, we honor those men who gave us representative government, who fought a revolution, who risked their lives and their family and their property. These men were flawed, as we all are. We have freedoms that may be under attack currently, but these freedoms were the result of principled men who walked their talk. These are men who made a covenant holding to an ideal. In these days, when money speaks louder than an individual, where profit is the primary motive, where retribution is often voiced, where individuals have ascendancy over the common good, we need to remember our founders who sacrificed so very much for us, for our common good. Democracy and its benefits did not come without costs. Maintaining that democracy is essential for our freedoms to continue to exist. Have we been a perfect experiment in democracy? No. But as many have said, it is an experiment that is ongoing. I ask that we consider recommitting ourselves to the principle of governing for the common good. To know that freedom doesn't mean that we can always do what we want, that we need to acknowledge that my freedom ends when it may do harm to others. Our values as UUs are intertwined with the values of democracy. Let us covenant together to foster and protect those rights. Amen. Our closing hymn is number 318, We Would Be One. Please rise in body or spirit as you may. We live in a country founded on the principles of equality, justice, of the right to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. Let us be grateful for those who fought the battles, both on the field and in the halls of government, which made this country possible. Let us each try to walk in the path of those principles so as to maintain our freedoms. And may we who feel all alone in this commitment remember what John Adams said: always stand on principle, even if you stand alone. But I also want to say, we do not stand alone. So be it. Amen, namaste, and blessed be.
Whenever I do a service with Becky, I always have written more of the service in my head as she goes along. And one of the things that I know about John Adams is Abigail was always talking to him. She had so much influence in all those incredible letters that she wrote him. So they may not have rights, but they certainly did have the ear of many of the men, which I love. And now we're going to extinguish our chalice, and Dawn's going to have to stop petting the dog. With the extinguishing of our chalice, our worship time has ended, and now our service to our community begins. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Blessed be. And now for those on Zoom, of which there are many, you may go into a breakout group with one another and have a discussion about what you heard today. For those here in person, are there any visitors or folks returning that would like to introduce yourself? If so, just raise your hand and stand up.
Good morning. My name is Becky, and I literally just moved here from Falls Church, Virginia, where this document was written.
Woo!
Retired from the CIA.
Whoa.
That's okay. I'm a scientist.
I have to say, is it Catherine? Catherine, I watched Catherine during the service, and I was ready to say, would you like to join the choir? Because she had that book and she was singing with heart. So Russ, at some point, maybe you can capture Catherine and have her keep coming back. Would anyone else like to introduce themselves? All right. Yeah, you don't have to join the choir to introduce yourselves. So you can retire to Davis Hall for refreshments and conversation, but Lena is going to play our final piece, This Land Is Your Land by Woody Guthrie. Please feel free to stand and join in. I don't believe we have the words, but we all know it. So if you'd like to do that, feel free. If you'd like to go get coffee, feel free. And thank you all for being here this morning.